In the bustling city of Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, lived a charming young man named Ben. He was the sole child of Mrs. Leza, a prosperous businesswoman who had lost her husband just before Ben's birth. From the moment Ben entered the world, he became Mrs. Leza's treasure, her sole comfort in a life marked by grief. Mrs. Leza's residence was a magnificent villa in the exclusive Beverly Hills sector of the city. The walls were adorned with costly paintings, and luxury furniture filled every room. It was in this environment of opulence that Ben grew up, never lacking anything. As Ben matured, it became evident that Mrs. Leza's love for her son knew no bounds. Whatever Ben desired, he received. When he was merely 5 years old, he threw a fit in a toy store, demanding the latest video game console. "Mommy, I want it now," Ben yelled, his face flushed with rage. While other shoppers stared disapprovingly, Mrs. Leza simply smiled and complied, even buying 2 consoles to ensure Ben had one for his room and one for the living room. This pattern of indulgence continued throughout Ben's childhood. Whenever he misbehaved, Mrs. Leza would dismiss it, proudly proclaiming, "My son can do no wrong." This unyielding support, though stemming from love, would pave the way for events that would alter their lives irreversibly. On his 10th birthday, as Mrs. Leza and her friend Rita, who had been friends with Leza since their college days, were enjoying fine wine in the plush living room, Ben burst in demanding attention. "Mom, I want to go to Wonderland Park next week. Book the tickets now," Ben commanded, completely ignoring Rita's presence. Mrs. Leza immediately agreed, calling her assistant to make the arrangements. As Ben strutted out, Rita could no longer keep silent. "Leza, you're spoiling him," Rita cautioned. Mrs. Leza's smile vanished, replaced by a look of defensiveness. "What do you mean? I'm just showing my son love," she retorted. Rita leaned in, her tone gentle yet firm. "Love isn't about giving him everything he asks for, it's about teaching him right from wrong, about preparing him for life." Mrs. Leza scoffed. "Ben will never need to worry about life, I've made sure of that." Rita shook her head sadly, warning that children raised this way often struggle when faced with real challenges. They don't know how to manage disappointment or failure. Mrs. Leza, dismissing Rita's concerns as she had done with others in the past, insisted, "My Ben is perfect. He'll never need to face failure because I'll always be there to ensure he succeeds." Years later, when Ben was 20, a troubling incident unfolded. Mrs. Leza returned home to find her housekeeper, Emma, a young woman from a modest background who had been employed by the family for a year, sobbing uncontrollably in the kitchen. Emma was hardworking and usually quiet, which made her current state particularly alarming to Mrs. Leza. "What's wrong?" Mrs. Leza asked, more annoyed than concerned. Between sobs, Emma revealed, "Madam, he got me pregnant." Mrs. Leza froze, her mind unable to grasp the implications of Emma's words. Instead of listening to Emma or contemplating the possibility that her son might be responsible, Mrs. Leza erupted in anger. This story from Abidjan serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of overindulgence and the importance of instilling responsibility in young people. As Ben's life unfolds, the consequences of his upbringing are revealed, teaching a hard lesson about love and discipline. Mrs. Leza screamed in rage, her face twisted with fury. "How dare you lie about my precious son?" Emma fell to her knees, begging, "Please, ma'am, I'm telling the truth. I didn't want to, but he insisted, and I was scared of losing my job." But Mrs. Leza wouldn't listen and shouted, "You ungrateful woman, after all we've done for you, you're just trying to trap my son to get our money." Breathing heavily after her outburst, Mrs. Leza stared down at the weeping Emma and coldly ordered her to get up, determined to end this matter immediately. She called her personal doctor, demanding, "Doctor, I need you to take care of this situation. Do what you must." Then she turned to her driver, who had witnessed the scene with a look of fear, and commanded, "Take this girl to the doctor's clinic now." Emma was hurried into the car, still crying and pleading, "Please, ma'am, don't do this." In her mind, Mrs. Leza believed she was protecting her son and the future she had envisioned for him. As Emma underwent the procedure to end her pregnancy, she wept bitterly, cursing, "God will punish you, Ben. You and your mother will suffer for what you've done to me." This incident was the start of a troubling pattern. Over the next 2 years, Ben caused Emma to become pregnant 3 more times, and each time Mrs. Lisa covered it up, forcing Emma to end the pregnancies. She refused to see the monster her son was becoming, always finding excuses for his behavior by telling herself, "Boys will be boys," and ignoring the pain and trauma inflicted on Emma. After the third incident, Emma finally found the courage to leave. As she packed her few belongings, Mrs. Lisa confronted her, demanding, "Where do you think you're going?" With tears in her eyes but a firm voice, Emma replied, "I'm leaving, ma'am. I can't do this anymore. What you and your son have done to me is wrong." Mrs. Lisa's expression turned steely. "If you tell anyone about this, I'll make sure you never find work in the city again. Do you understand?" Emma looked at Mrs. Lisa, and for the first time, the older woman saw not fear, but pity in the young girl's eyes. "I understand, ma'am, but remember, every action has consequences. Someday, you and Ben will have to face yours." With that, Emma left the house, leaving Mrs. Lisa to grapple with doubts she quickly suppressed. Meanwhile, Ben remained oblivious to the pain he caused and continued living a carefree life, partying with friends, spending his mother's money, and treating people as if they were there for his pleasure. After graduating from university with mediocre grades, boosted by substantial donations from his mother, he was required to participate in the 1-year National Youth Service Corps (NYSC) program. He was assigned to teach at Delight Secondary School in a rural area of Nigeria. The night before his departure, Ben lounged in his room, surrounded by expensive gadgets and designer clothes, trying to decide what to pack. Mrs. Lisa knocked on his door. "Ben, my darling, are you ready for tomorrow?" Ben groaned dramatically. "Mom, do I really have to go? Can't he talk to someone and get me posted somewhere in the city instead?" Mrs. Lisa sat on the edge of his bed, patting his hand. "I'm sorry, my love, but even I couldn't change this. It's only for a year. Think of it as an adventure." Ben rolled his eyes. "Some adventure, stuck in the middle of nowhere, teaching a bunch of village girls." Mrs. Lisa gently chided him. "It won't be that bad, and remember, you're my son. You can handle anything." As she left the room, Ben flopped back on his bed, already planning how to make his year of service as easy and comfortable as possible. Arriving at the school compound on his first day, Ben saw the young students and a smile played on his lips. "I think I'm going to enjoy my stay here," he thought, unaware of the challenges and growth that awaited him in this new environment. This tale from a distant land serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of indulgence and the importance of instilling responsibility and empathy in the young. As Ben navigates his year of service, he will encounter situations that test his character and force him to confront the consequences of his upbringing, hopefully learning valuable lessons about respect, responsibility, and the impact of one's actions on others. The next morning, as Ben's driver loaded his many suitcases into the car, Mrs. Lisa fussed over her son. "Are you sure you have everything, darling? Your 18 card, your new phone?" Ben nodded impatiently. "Yes, Mom. I've got everything. Can we go now?" As they said their goodbyes, neither could imagine how this year would profoundly change their lives. This was Ben's first time away from his mother, and although the thought initially made him sad, his mood quickly shifted to excitement upon arriving at Delight Secondary School. As he walked into the school grounds and noticed the schoolgirls, a grin spread across his face. "I think I'm going to enjoy my stay here," he thought to himself, already planning his next moves. The school principal, Mr. Alu, a dignified man in his 50s, greeted Ben warmly. "Welcome to Delight Secondary School, Mr. Ben. I trust you will find your stay here both challenging and rewarding." Ben flashed his most charming smile. "Thank you, sir. I look forward to making a positive impact." Mr. Alu nodded approvingly, unaware of the thoughts running through Ben's mind. After completing the necessary paperwork, Mr. Alu led Ben to his assigned classroom. "You'll be teaching physics to our senior girls," Mr. Alu explained. "It's a critical subject for their final exams, so we're counting on you to prepare them well." Ben's interest peaked upon hearing this, Physics was a subject he was quite familiar with from university, and the prospect of teaching it to senior girls added to his excitement. As they entered the classroom, 30 pairs of eyes turned to look at them. Mr. Alu cleared his throat and introduced Ben. "Girls, this is Mr. Ben, your new physics teacher for this academic year. I expect you to show him the utmost respect and dedication to your studies." Ben scanned the room, noting the admiring glances from many of the girls. "Hello everyone, I'm excited to be here and to help you all excel in physics. I have a feeling this is going to be a great year," he announced, receiving a collective sigh from the classroom. Among the senior class students were 3 girls, Joy, Beauty, and Precious, who were known as the PGs or prettiest girls in school. As Ben began his first lesson, he aimed to create the perfect first impression, showcasing his intelligence and charm. He peppered his lecture with jokes and relatable examples, capturing the class's attention. "Now, who can tell me about Newton's law of motion?" Ben asked, his eyes scanning the classroom. Beauty's hand shot up. "Sir, Newton's first law states that an object will remain at rest or in uniform motion in a straight line unless acted upon by an external force," she answered. Ben's eyes locked with Beauty's. "Excellent, Miss Beauty," he replied, a coy smile playing on her lips. "Well done, Beauty. It seems I have some bright students in this class," he praised. As the lesson progressed, Ben made sure to engage all the students, but he couldn't help paying extra attention to Beauty and her friends. He noticed the admiration in their eyes and planned to use it to his advantage. After class, as the students filed out, Joy, Beauty, and Precious lingered behind. "Mr. Ben," Precious said, "we just wanted to say how much we enjoyed your lesson. Physics has never been so interesting." Ben feigned a moment of consideration, though internally he was thrilled at the opportunity. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. Physics can be fascinating when approached the right way. I might be available for extra tutoring to ensure you're fully prepared for your exams," he suggested. "We were wondering," Joyce chimed in, "if you might be available for extra tutoring." Ben responded, "Well, I suppose I could make some time for dedicated students. Why don't we discuss it more after school tomorrow?" The girls nodded eagerly, exchanging excited glances as they left the classroom. Ben couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. This was going to be an interesting year indeed, filled with opportunities to influence and interact closely with his students. As he settled into his new role, he started to appreciate the responsibilities and challenges that came with being a teacher, gradually understanding the impact he could have on these young lives. This year away from his mother's protective embrace was set to be a transformative experience, challenging him to grow in ways he had never anticipated. Over the following weeks, Ben's popularity as the coolest teacher at the school soared. Students eagerly awaited his classes, drawn by his good looks and charm. However, it was the PGs, Joy, Beauty, and Precious, who truly captured his attention. Ben quickly became their favorite teacher, often giving them high marks in his subject. One day, after the class ended, Ben asked Beauty to stay behind as the other students left. With her heart racing, Beauty approached his desk. "You want to see me, Mr. Ben?" she asked, trying to sound calm. Ben smiled at her, his gaze lingering a bit too long. "Yes, Beauty, I wanted to talk about your last test. You've improved a lot," he told her. Beauty smiled, pleased. "Thank you, sir. I've been studying hard." Ben stood up and moved closer. "You know, Beauty, you're one of my brightest students. You could have a real future in physics if you want." Beauty blushed and looked down shyly. Ben reached out and gently lifted her chin, making her look at him. "I mean it, and please, when we're alone, you can call me Ben." Beauty was taken aback, barely managing to whisper, "Okay, Ben." Their moment was abruptly interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Mr. Alu, the principal. Mr. Ben," he said, eyeing Ben and Beauty with a hint of suspicion. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Ben quickly stepped back. "Not at all, sir. I was just offering Beauty some extra encouragement. She's shown remarkable improvement." Mr. Alu nodded, still looking a bit doubtful. "I see," he replied before turning to leave. Ben smiled to himself, thinking about his secret plans. Meanwhile, Joy, Beauty, and Precious were in the girls' bathroom, excitedly discussing their interactions with Ben. "Did you see how Mr. Ben looked at me today?" Precious exclaimed. "I swear he was staring at me the whole time." Joy rolled her eyes. "Please, he was obviously looking at me. Didn't you notice how he kept using my name in examples?" Beauty listened to her friends argue, a secretive smile on her lips, knowing about her private moment with Ben. As weeks passed, Ben's behavior became more inappropriate. He started offering private tutoring sessions to the PGs, using this as a chance to flirt and make subtle advances. During one session at Joy's house, Ben sat very close to her on the couch, explaining a concept in physics. "So you see," Ben said softly, "the force of attraction between two objects is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them." Joy nodded, distracted by Ben's closeness. "So, the closer they are, the stronger the attraction," Ben murmured, turning to face her. "Their faces were inches apart." "Exactly. Can you feel it?" Joy hesitated, then nodded slowly. Just then, her phone buzzed with a text from Beauty asking how the session was going. The spell broken, Joy suggested. "Maybe we should take a break." Ben, hiding his annoyance, agreed. "Of course, we've covered a lot today." Ben left Joy's house feeling exhilarated by the game he was playing. He had all three girls believing they were special to him. However, one day during Miss Carroll's biology lesson, Joy suddenly felt nauseous and had to leave the classroom quickly. Concerned, Miss Carroll continued her lesson, but soon after, Beauty and Precious also excused themselves, feeling sick. Miss Carroll found the three girls in the bathroom, all vomiting severely. "Girls," she said gently, "is everything all right? Should we go to the school clinic?" The friends exchanged nervous looks before nodding silently. At the clinic, Dr. Margaret, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, examined each girl. After seeing the last one, she looked grave. "Girls, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Is there any chance any of you might be pregnant?" The silence that followed confirmed Dr. Margaret's suspicions. Tests later showed that all three girls were pregnant. This revelation shocked the school community and led to a series of events that would reveal Ben's true character and the consequences of his actions. The school had to confront the serious implications of a teacher's misconduct, and Ben faced significant repercussions for his behavior. This situation served as a stark reminder of the responsibilities educators carry and the impact their actions can have on their students' lives.